So, questions?
Yeah, okay. Maybe Steve and Tim can talk a little bit about the project that we did with the flow bank models we are working on and how your genomics is working in that process. Steve, can you maybe elaborate a bit on this?
Sure. So there is an active UP project that's specifically focused on monitoring microbial community structure and function in various waters associated with hydraulic fracturing. The whole development cycle, both from the freshwater inputs to the recycled waters that are used to conduct the frac, mixed waters that flow into the ground during the fracking process, and then the production waters, the flowback waters that come back from underground. And we partnered with the regulator, Ken's group. They're a real important stakeholder because we want to do these baseline studies in the context of the production cycle, because we want to know what's going into the ground and what's coming out of the ground. Ultimately, we'd like to relate that to some of the wells that people use for their drinking water, but that has not transpired yet. But we're just getting started with that, and that's through one of the 18-month short-term projects through GFC. Yeah. Any additional thing?
Not really. I just add that one of the areas that I noticed when I was doing my extensive research on that slide that there had been an application of biology to depleted hydrocarbon reservoirs, particularly heavy oil, and conversion of the heavy oils to methanes, which I thought was very interesting. And probably there are similar opportunities, I think, with respect to the fluids that we use for hydraulic fracturing in terms of not just stimulation and brute force creation of the fracture network, but also to improving the overall production and longevity of the well.
Other questions? Okay, well, so I have a question. One or all of you can comment on this. One of the things that I come to learn about this sector is that it's very data intensive. There's data collected about all sorts of observations around the environment, around the actual drilling, and everything else essentially. One of the challenges that people in the health area are facing is combining a lot of this situational, phenotypic, but essentially data about the greater environment. I get the sense that we're talking order or magnitude more of data here, and then more diverse sorts of data here. So, just like your thoughts on, presumably that would be a critical thing in incorporating that data, this molecular data, and developing the analytics to glean future thoughts and to answer problems around us. But some of the challenges and time frames and how that might all come together in the bigger picture.
Maybe I can get started. Yeah, so I think in our project, you're right, we do collect a lot of data, different data streams. We look at gas concentrations as they evolve in the ground. We look at physical parameters which affect the generation of gases and the fate of the gases in the ground. But it's somewhat descriptive in a lot of ways, and sometimes we don't really know why is this critical change now occurring. And I think microbiology or genomic data really can help us out to provide a key to that understanding that we can really develop that further. So that's really where the microbiology could come in. I provided that example earlier on, and there's a site, actually a site in Ontario. Once again, it's a train derailed with an ethanol spill into the ground, and people were monitoring there, and they didn't really find anything. But they were back a year later, and then there was quite a bit of white methane coming out of the ground. Looking at those sort of transitions and really being able to explain that, why is that happening? It's got to have something to do with microbial ecology at that site.
And just to add to that, from the modeling perspective, I'm not a modeler, but Uli is. And so the challenge looking forward, and it's an exciting challenge in effect, is to look for ways to integrate the molecular sequence information into the types of numerical modeling that Uli would typically conduct for predicting methane flux and so forth. And we're very much in the infancy there, doing trait-based type of modeling, where you take the metabolic pathway information or the taxonomic information that is gleaned from the microbial community, and you integrate that within the numeric model. We haven't done that yet, but we certainly talk about it.
Yeah, maybe just a follow-up to that is like what we're doing right now is more or less what's called history matching, just try to like fit our model to observational data, but if we're honest to ourselves, I think we have very little predictive capabilities, and by putting that the genomic information into the models, I think we really can increase that predictive capability.
And we've talked also, going back to the types of collaborations that we do with the regulators, and how the information can be disseminated publicly, the extent to which you can have databases that would be available to the community. We're still working on that data release policy, but our vision would be to have the molecular sequence information available through the BCOG website, along with water use information. So it's an integrated data package that's available through the regulatory body, and it goes both to the industrial stakeholders, but also to the public at large.
Any other questions?
Ken, maybe I can just ask you a question. I'll direct this to Ken, but anybody can feel free to participate. So I'm curious from the regulatory side of things. Most of my background and expertise is on the human health side. So a lot of times regulators they almost don't want to have data that they don't know how to completely interpret. It makes their job more difficult. Can you just comment on, in this industry where there's, incredibly, it's very expensive to move this industry forward. Every one of these wells is a very expensive endeavor. So can you comment from putting a regulatory hat on, of kind of how you perceive this data? Because it's obvious we're early in the learning curve of how this is actually going to inform, I think, you as the regulator. And so, is it something that is welcomed by you at this point? Is it something you would encourage? Is it something you would discourage a company coming to you from participating in? Can you just give us some sense of that?
One of the basic tenets of the Commission and most oil and gas regulators in Canada anyway is transparency, neutrality, and transparency. So regulators don't make public policy. Regulators enact public policy and look after the charge that they're given, in our case, protection of people, property, and the environment, really, and development of the resource, and conserving the resource, which oddly enough doesn't mean not developing the resource, it means developing the resource as efficiently and effectively as possible. So, in the context of what I mentioned. So, in terms of data and information, I know that there was probably about 8 or 9 years ago in the United States, there were a lot of legal concerns and issues raised around as inline inspection for pipelines was becoming more and more common, the data was becoming better and better. Companies were asking, actually, sometimes when they were purchasing pipelines, not to be given the data. They didn't want it on the record. They didn't want anything telling them what the condition of the pipe they were purchasing was that could come back to haunt them. Seems counterintuitive from an engineering perspective, but maybe from a legal perspective it makes sense. So I would say that as regulators in the Crown, we have a duty to inform people and make information available. So the trouble and always the balance, I think, is finding the right information and building trust. So for example, we had created hydraulic fracturing in British Columbia and our new oil and gas drilling and production rigs in 2010. The concern raised by folks was around contamination of groundwater by hydraulic fracturing. So in that regulation, we made it a requirement that a company that's doing hydraulic fracturing had to sample the fluid, do a profile of the fluid, and maintain a sample of the fluid for the life of the well. The logic being that if there was ever anyone who claimed there was any contamination resulting from the hydraulic fracturing, you go back to the company, get the sample, get the fingerprint, compare it to the analysis of the groundwater with contamination, claim it's yes or no. Seems relatively sound from a science perspective. From a public perspective, it cannot meet the test. The public wanted disclosure of hydraulic fracturing fluid constituents. So even though the end result, we're arguing, would be seeing in terms of protection of the groundwater, we've been doing the full disclosures. So regulators are constantly balancing, I think, science and public perception and making information available. And it's sometimes challenging to find the right balance.
But just to add to that comment about fingerprinting, we're not actually at the stage where we're using the molecular sequence as the fingerprint, right? So to take a lesson from the human microbiome, where there's a lot of energy spent on barcoding human health and disease states with respect to microbial communities, and then trying to correlate with those health and disease states or treatment regimes and so forth, using that barcode as a diagnostic. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to base on that in the context of the fracking projects. And what's exciting is that you can see that we're starting to get in early in that process. I mean, these wells have been drilled, and this has been going on in the province for a number of years, but we're still in that early stage before the exponential growth. And so we hope that using those barcoding approaches and making that information available, that transparency will be there for public perception.
I'd like to add a couple of comments on that. In terms of the projects that Steve Hallam and Ulrich are working on, and together with the support from BC and guys. When we talk about flowback waters, think for a moment 3,000 meters down. People thought there was no microbial activities underground. Some preliminary analysis showed that there are microbes. More importantly, when the fracking companies start, they will kill off all the microbes and there will be no negative effects. The result is, at least some preliminary analysis shows, that the bad microbes, the hydrogen sulfide producing microbes, are still alive. So how do you control those things? There's where the genomics comes in. That's a very interesting point. Another area that certainly BC Oil and Gas is very concerned about, and the corporations as well, in terms of spillage. If you take it for flowback waters, it's about 3,000 meters down, high salt content. If you get a spillage, how do you remediate salt? Very difficult. You can't do it with microbes. So then you start looking into, can we use phytoremediation? Can we stimulate plants to absorb the salt? Again, there's a piece of research that genomics can play a role. These are a couple of examples where you can really, the industry and the regulator coming together to work at potential solutions that can prevent or can solve the potential contaminations or reduce the cost of cleanup.
Are there any other questions at all for the panel? Okay, well, why don't we
let's first start by, let's thank everybody for joining me.